Welcome back to Practical Economics. Today let's talk about housing prices. We know that it's become more and more difficult for people, and especially young people, to afford housing. The difference between the average worker's wage and housing prices has continued to grow. Something that may be really interesting is that the overall price of housing actually hasn't changed when viewed from different metrics. When comparing to workers' wages, definitely prices have increased, but there's two components to that. There's the house pricing and the wages. Another way to compare that would be the total income for the US. And let's take a step back for a minute. The same way that there's GDP that most people are familiar with, it's the gross domestic product that's related to the goods that are developed in the country. There's the gross national income, and that has to do with all of the income that all of the citizens generate. And this is two main components. There's the labor component, so wages, and then the other component is related to investment income, so all interest and dividends and all other capital related income. Now, over time, if you look back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, there was a split that was approximately equal between worker wages and capital related income. If you fast forward to today, that split has changed so that worker income or worker wages has decreased and capital based income has increased. Taken together, if you compare the overall income of the United States, or even by breaking it down on a per person basis, so take that whole pie, divide by the number of people that are alive right now in the US, similarly compared it to the distribution look like this, worker wages and capital income from say 1980, and compared that to the average house price, you would see that they're almost identical. So in terms of the total pot of money available in any given year, this is again just a different metric or way of looking at it, you could buy just as many houses in 1980 as you could right now. You could buy just as many now as you could then. It's actually slightly better. They're slightly cheaper now, according to those metrics. And similarly, homes have also increased in size. So you'd be able to buy the same number of houses, maybe slightly more houses now, and also they would be larger houses. Presumably, well, you could argue if they would be nicer or not. They would be larger. Some of the character hasn't been, we haven't developed character as much in more recent homes, likely due to decreased earnings for workers, so that we don't have as much margin to try to make things nice or interesting or cool. So all of that to say that house prices haven't changed. It's the income that changed, and I think it's really deceptive. It's a deceptive way that there's not more talk about this. Wages are really the driving factor to housing cost concerns. And this really plays into, I think, all the different things that we talk about are connected. Another reason that you would see, or another way that you would see this, is we are still seeing other groups buy up lots of property. Specifically, private investment firms are buying up properties. And I think that's becoming more and more well known that larger and larger portions of the single family housing as well as multifamily housing is being purchased by, again, investment firms. They have more of the income. It's not just the wealth, it's the income itself. So this income, if they're seeing more marginal income than the workers are, they have the buying power, and for them it looks approximately the same price or like a slightly better deal. And as other asset prices are driven up due to more and more purchasing of those assets, or driving those up with capital looking for more places to invest in, then housing becomes a very good place to park more capital to buy up more properties. So high level, it's not really a housing demand problem, although those do exist, and that changes depending on where you are in the country. It's not really a housing that we're being priced out overall in terms of the US, it's that wages are decreasing. Wages have decreased over time. We'll have to talk about this in a different video, but even comparing to inflation is really a distorted way to look at earnings and abilities, because, and we'll just hint to this now, but any efficiencies that are gained due to technologies, or process, or things like that, that reduce the cost of that basket of goods, you're now paying for something that's more efficient, but you're not getting your same benefit for your dollar. So the overall value of what you got, or the cost to produce it, decreased. And so with that, if you're just keeping up with inflation, then the value of the dollar that you have to purchase that as well has overall decreased. We'll talk about that in greater length in other videos. Overall, I just wanted to get to this point that the housing cost hasn't actually increased. The cost relative to our wages has increased. What we need to fix is the problem with our wages. The only real way to do that, if we want to mimic, in some ways, we have a rubric, we have a blueprint for when we had the greatest prosperity for the working class. And that was 50s, 60s, 70s, up through about 85. During that time, the number one change that's different from now is related to the tax policy. Tax policy is, I think, in some ways, the most important part. I would separate out the US economy as a whole, or whatever economy you're talking about, and then the impact of how that economy affects different groups within the overall economy. So the workers, capital owners, things like this, those are really two separate pieces. You can have a very strong economy. Overall, I would say that we have a strong economy right now, but the way that workers are being treated, they're not feeling the strength of the economy. So backing up again, the problem is wages. The problem is income inequality, it's wealth inequality, and the way that wealth and income are taxed in society and then valued. That's all we'll talk about for today. Just want to do something fairly quick, breaking down, I think, a very different understanding of housing costs. If you have questions, if you have interest, leave me a comment down below. I'd love to be engaged in more of a conversation. Thanks. See you guys soon.